Hello, this is Matthew Waterhouse, and you're watching the Sirens of Audio.
One day, you will subscribe. Yes, you will subscribe. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just click the notification bell and write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the show that explores the universe of Doctor Who and other cult TV in the audio medium. I'm Dwayne.
And I'm Philip. G'day, Dwayne. G'day, audiophiles.
G'day Philip, it's another new year, how do you feel?
Wow, I feel younger. I feel like I've got a year younger in the new year.
Well, there you go, it's fascinating the way these things work, isn't it? I just breathed in some saliva. I'm not cutting that out either. All right. In this episode, it's a very exciting one. We have a very special guest that's joining us for the podcast this time, and that is Adric himself, Matthew Waterhouse, will be joining us, and we're very excited to be able to share that with you soon. But not only that, Philip, we're going to see him on the podcast, but for those in Australia, what can you tell us about Matthew Waterhouse?
Well, Matthew Waterhouse is coming to Australia. So people in Melbourne, Adelaide and Sydney, you all have the opportunity to go and see him live, and he's going to be very entertaining, and you're going to tell lots of stories, some you've never heard before, I'm sure, and just get to meet him in the flesh. So for those who are in Australia, he's going to appear first in Melbourne, and so he's going to be on Sunday the 23rd of March. So Melbourne's 23rd of March, and there will be a VIP dinner the night before that. And then the following weekend, on the 29th, I think it is, I hope, on the Saturday, he'll be in Adelaide, and there'll be a dinner the night before that on the Friday, VIP dinner the night before that, and then Adelaide. And then on the Sunday, the 30th, he's going to be in Sydney, once again at Club Parramatta, and the VIP dinner will be after the event on that night. So 3 opportunities, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Sydney. I apologise for other cities, but Brisbane's not far. Come on down. Come to Sydney. It's going to be amazing. And
hey, he's not. I've got to come up from Tasmania, so come on. Exactly. If I've got to do it, everyone else can.
Yeah. So come across, and some of the Perth people, 50% podcast, come across to Adelaide. I'd love to see you there. But we'll get you all the venues lined up and booked up now. There'll be more information to follow. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Blue Skies and all the other usual places, Facebook, and to keep all the information up. And we'll keep updating the website as well as we keep going. But we have been so lucky with our guests. I mean, I'm just still blown away by how lucky we've been with all of them. And this is going to be another amazing one. So come along, support it, and that keeps making it easier for us to bring out more people down the track.
So for those who might be thinking, yeah, we'll just watch this podcast today and that'll be our dose of Matthew Waterhouse. No, it won't be enough, because we've left enough out of his Doctor Who history so that you come and get the stories in person. So be prepared for that. But the stories that you're going to hear today are very, very interesting as well. But before we get to our chat with Matthew, Philip, do you know what?
What, Dwayne?
We have to jump down the rabbit hole. Let's go. All right, we are down the rabbit hole, and I thought I'd make it nice and easy this time, because I know you have a certain affection for Adric, and so I guess Adric is a bit of a polarizing character at times, but I know you and I both love the character of Adric. We were both boys at the time, and so I guess there was some to relate to. But how did you relate to Adric back in the day? when he first appeared?
Back in the day. So I was trying to work it out, I think I would have been in year 6 when he first appeared on TV. And I love the character. So I can say I think there's been a reappraisal. I think there was a period of hate for Adric. There's always this fan perceived knowledge out there, like the gunfighters is bad when it's not.
It's not.
And yeah, there's all sorts. Yeah, there's all sorts of fan wisdom that somehow exists. And then when you actually get down to it, it's often not that wise and not what people think. And there was a period of time, I think, when perceived fan wisdom was that Adric wasn't that good a character. And I really think we've come full circle now,
so to speak.
there. And I think most people now actually recognise the fact that actually no, there's actually an awful lot that's good about the character and good about Matthew's performance. And he does do some pretty stunning performances in some episodes in particular. I think he's really really does a great job. He was a very young actor. He was 18 for goodness sake. So what he does is that. But for me, I was actually said a few years younger. I was sort of year 6. I was kind of the target audience, I guess. And yeah, I thought it was great having a boy, energetic, who made mistakes on the TARDIS. He was a character I could really relate to. And as much as I love the Doctor and I love Romana, both versions of the Romana, so that's sort of Romana 1 and then Romana 2 with Lala, they weren't really anyone I could relate to. I enjoyed watching their adventures, but with Adric, I actually felt like I was part of it. And probably for the first time, actually, I felt I could have been in the TARDIS. It actually gave me hey, I could travel with the Doctor, because I could now see someone who was actually like me. So yeah, I really enjoyed Adric, and I love the performance. And going back now, I still, nostalgically, it's still an awful lot. And there's times in which I think, they gave him too much the same to do in terms of stop betraying the Doctor or looking like you are. It was a bit of a plot point that they probably used once or twice too often. But on the whole, it's actually not as much as I thought it was. My memory was he turned on the Doctor every story. He doesn't do that. And often he's not actually turning on at all. It's all just a trick anyhow. So it worked. What do you think about Adric?
Well, I didn't really get a chance to get to know Adric at the time he was on TV because I was probably about 8 or 9 when he hit the screens in Australia. And so during that early 80s, I struggled to get all the new episodes. So I was doing a lot of, as I was, going to the library, I was borrowing novels. They were usually the older series novels. The novels I did get, I think I recall reading Castrovalva before ever seeing it. I know that, although Castrovalva was one that I did see early. So I remember Adric from the web and what that was like.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until a later run, sort of in the mid-80s, when I think, when was it being shown? Was it being shown Saturday afternoons? I think it was Saturday afternoons, and I was recording the episodes off the television, and we got all the way to the Visitation. So that was my first taste of Adric. I loved him with the Fourth Doctor. In fact, in some ways, I think Adric is better as a character and more interesting as a character with the Fourth Doctor. Because he sort of gets drowned out a bit with the TARDIS crew becoming a little bit too big with the Fifth Doctor in that season. Although they're still all very good, the part just has to get spread out a bit more. But I did enjoy him with the Fourth in particular. But as it was going through on the repeats in Australia, got up to the Visitation, I was going, I'm so looking forward to seeing Earthshock. I'd never seen Earthshock before. I'd heard all about it. I may have even read the Target novel, borrowed it from the library. I don't know. But I got to the Visitation. And the next week I went to record on my Beta video recorder, and it was Warriors of the Deep. It had skipped everything between Black Orchid and the King's Demons and started with Warriors of the Deep. And even the Awakening was cut out of that season. Yeah, I didn't see the Awakening for years later either, because I think they were showing 4-episode omnibuses. So maybe they got to Black Orchid for some reason, but that being a 2-parter.
So this was UK Gold you were watching this on then?
No, this is the ABC. It was the ABC, and it skipped right to, start of season 21 after the Visitation was the next one. We have to find someone who's got all the records of the program guides and see what that actually was. Although it's not going to explain it. I don't really understand it because I was looking forward to the whole of season 20 because I was going back to Gallifrey. I'm always a fan of Gallifrey-based stories, and there was Snake Dance that looked to be more promising than Kinder, which I wasn't totally enamored with at the time, but I've come to love it more and more as time goes by. But anyway, actually Kinder's another good one for Adric too, the interesting relationship between Adric and the Doctor. is played out throughout Kinder. So I liked the character all the way through. And, eventually, finally seeing Earthshock. I saw Earthshock for the first time at one of the Doctor Who parties. It was I saw it at Sydney Uni in that room that we always got together at the Doctor Who Club of Australia. You've probably seen things in there too. Might have been I'd seen things like The Rescue for the first time down at the club, and I saw what else did I see? Survival, I think I saw for the first time at the uni. So this is where I saw Earthshock for the first time. May have actually even been at Whovention, I don't know. But it was very, very exciting. And yeah, I've always struggled to see that perceived fan wisdom, like why the disdain for the character of Adric so much. I've never quite understood it. The only thing I was disappointed with the TV series was how quickly they sort of moved on, but I guess they had to for the purpose of 25-minute episodes, and they had to get into the next adventure somehow. They didn't really carry on.
No, that being said, he gets mentioned more than anyone else in terms of he does appear as a ghost in the next series.
Well, so he should. He died. He should get a mention.
Well, I think that was only done in terms of the TV radio guide, so people wouldn't know that it left, because that way they could still put Matthew Waterhouse in the Radio Times cast listing.
Okay,
so that allowed him to do that. But it's the last word that Peter Davison says before he regenerates is Adric. So he's always played on the Doctor's mind. And can I say, that last scene and the silent screen and the broken star after Earthshock, I remember sobbing through that, and I remember my mother coming and saying, "What's the matter?" Because I didn't know it was coming, and being utterly devastated by Adric going. And I think the issue with Adric is a lot of. I think Wesley Crusher suffered the same thing in Star Trek Next Generation, whereas older teenagers and young adults just didn't like kids saving the world or being part of the solutions. And I know that the actor who played Wesley Crusher, I can't think his name off the top of my head. Is that dreadful? No, can't do it. And I think the same with Adric is there was just this, people just didn't like these young, it should be the adult crew should have been saving the whole world every time, not other young people involved. And I think, those young actors copped a lot.
Well, that was actually part of the storyline of Earthshock itself. You've got that friction between the Doctor and Adric, where Adric's trying to come up with a solution. The Doctor's just, ignoring him, and Adric's getting really frustrated with that. That was the whole plot of that. So I guess in real life, people actually felt that way too. So, but yeah, I think it was a good, heroic way to go. Big Finish hasn't let the character die either. He came back in a audio, I think for the first time, played by Andrew Sachs in a story called The Boy Who Time Forgot, which it's been years and years since I've heard that story. I can't even remember how it went. I just remember it was Andrew Sachs. So, we've got Manuel playing Adric. But poor Andrew Sachs, he's so typecast with Manuel. Every time you see his name, that's all I can think of. But he's done so many other good things. But yeah, and then of course he's come back throughout the Big Finish range, and there's been a couple of outstanding performances. And then the Blu-rays came out with some of these documentaries. The one in particular that really stood out to me. Some really good documentaries from the JNT era about A Weekend with Waterhouse. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it yet, Philip, because you've
seen that one yet.
You've only recently acquired the Blu-rays, or actually you've only just recently acquired a Blu-ray player, I believe.
Both.
So that's for you to look forward to. I'm sure you'll see it before Matthew comes out. But I saw that documentary and I thought, what a lovely man this guy is. He's so interesting to listen to. So I knew what to kind of expect when we spoke to him, and we're going to share that with you very shortly. So a lovely guy who has played a pretty interesting character. So yeah, that's what I think about that, Philip.
Excellent. We should go talk to him.
So how about I throw in a trailer for something that I really love, and that is a story called The Lost Resort and Other Stories. The Lost Resort, there's a few stories on the box set, but The Lost Resort is one in particular that gives Adric and the Doctor and companions a really good chance for a proper send-off, very emotional. So I'll play a trail for that, and then we'll come back with Matthew Waterhouse.
So, where to now, Doctor?
Somewhere restful, I think. We could all do with a break.
From Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, The Lost Resort, and other stories.
I'd say we're standing under a lake, or a lagoon from the smell of it.
Water? But it's floating in the air.
Gravitational fluctuations in the atmosphere, Tegan. Not all planets are so dull as to keep their water at ground level.
Death is an unwanted companion.
You also know of grief.
When you're my age, my dear, grief is stitched into living. It just depends how you wear it.
Oh! No! No!
There's no such thing as ghosts.
Oh, Doctor. You're quite wrong about that.
My name's Nellie Bly. I am going to beat the world record set by Phileas Fogg, who traveled the world in 80 days.
We're going to reach San Francisco soon, and all will be lost.
Even the passengers will notice if I turn the ship around.
There must be something you can do. Lower the sea anchor. Then Nellie Bly really will have something to complain about.
I need someone to get me to my final destination.
Not his greatest strength, to be honest.
You are the Doctor! You are an enemy of the Daleks! You will be exterminated!
Right, yes, should have expected that, but before you do, ask yourselves, what is the greatest enemy of the Daleks doing here?
They killed a man, a father.
That's what Daleks do.
What? How can you say that? Get away from her, you man!
Exterminate!
No! Mac, come on, this way!
But Doctor!
No time to argue, quickly!
You will not escape!
Big Finish. We love stories.
I've said so many goodbyes over the years, they never get any easier.
So, we're really thrilled to have on our program today Matthew Waterhouse. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us.
It's okay. Hello.
So, where are we talking to you? Where are you at the moment, roughly?
I'm in Hastings on the south coast of England, about 90 minutes from London.
Famous for the battle.
So Hastings is where King William invaded and fought Harold, and all the Normans took over England for a while.
So does it mean you get lovely weather?
They're not Scotland.
Lovely weather there, or lousy weather? What's the weather like?
It is apparently, the weather's a bit mixed, of course, being England, but apparently it is officially the warmest place in Britain. It has the warmest climate in Britain, apparently.
Well, there you go.
There's a town down the coast called Eastbourne, which also claims to be the warmest place in Britain. But that's only if you include a bit of Eastbourne that isn't really Eastbourne. It's actually a cliff some miles out from the centre. So Hastings is pretty confident that it has the real official best temperature in Britain. But we're right on the sea, so where we live, we can see the fishermen going out, because it's still a functioning fishing town. So you can still see the fishermen going out, every morning if you're up early enough.
So is it more cliffs or more beaches for us, or both?
Hastings is both. We have a cliff behind us, a whole country park, which is miles. It's 300 acres or so. It's massive anyway. But also it's beach right in front of us is beach, and it does have a tourist element. In the summer it gets tourists, and they have lots of fish and chip shops and ice cream sellers and all the sort of stuff you'd expect. And there's a pier, but because of the functioning fishing town, the fish is great, because it is, if you go to a really good fish and chip shop, the fish is fish that came out of the sea, a day earlier from a fishing boat, right next to the fish and chip shop, basically. So it's that kind of thing. And it's interesting because it's a beach launched fishing fleet, which means there isn't a dock or anything. It's literally they're pulled into the sea by a tractor, basically. And then at the end of the day or the end of the fishing session, they're roped up onto the beach. Because the Victorians tried to build a sort of dock, but it didn't work. Because the sea is too rough. So it's, I think, the only beach-launched fishing fleet left in Britain, I think.
So do many fishermen die? I mean, it sounds like it's dangerous weather and...
Well, there's a fisherman museum about 3 minutes, less than that, actually, about 20 seconds from our front door, which has stories of, yes, it certainly happened. I'm not aware of it happening very much nowadays. But yeah, there are all sorts of dramatic stories. Not stories from the dim, distant past, but stories in people's living memory of, dramas at sea and that whole thing. Yeah, certainly it's been known to happen. Yes, It's a tough life being a fisherman.
Yeah, well,
not that I've ever been one.
Sounds like a lovely part of the world. Hopefully to get over there sometime soon. Let's go back to the other side of the start of your life. Though, where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was actually born in a town called Hertford, in Hertfordshire, just north of London. But I spent my childhood in Haywards Heath, Sussex, West Sussex, which is it's a commuter town, really. It's 45 minutes from London Victoria Station. My father commuted to London every day, so it's that part of it's that sort of thing. It's a commuter town essentially.
And what was school like for you?
I went to a school on the coast. I used to take the train to school to Shoreham, so train to Brighton and then change at Brighton on to Shoreham. So I had a half-hour train journey to school. It's a place called Shoreham College. It was called Shoreham Grammar School then. It's now Shoreham College. It's very weird because I've never been back to it. I'm not a sort of nostalgic school days. Oh, school days are so wonderful. I'm not that at all. But I had a reason to walk past it a couple of months ago. Walked past the gate for the first time since I left school. So I'm talking about for the first time in 45 something years, I actually found myself walking past the gate. And occasionally the playing field was had a railway at the foot of at its foot, so that I've occasionally seen the school from the train when I'm going through to Chichester or somewhere like that, which I've done occasionally. But actually getting off the train at the station I used to get off at to go to school and walking past my school was a really odd sensation. It's very peculiar. I didn't have a rush of nostalgia or anything like that. It was just a very odd feeling. And even though I think there have been some new buildings built at the back, it looks vaguely the same. Basically, it was this old converted manor house, and the manor house is still there. It essentially looks the same.
So was school a happy place?
It's quite a spooky thing.
Was school something you enjoyed? Was it a good place for you?
I wouldn't say I loved it, but it was all. I mean, it wasn't an unhappy school. It was all right. There wasn't huge amounts of. I mean, it was, it's a school and stuff happens, but I don't think there was a huge amount of bullying or misery, no more than you would expect. It was all right. It was a boys only school though. Now it's not. It's girls and boys, but then it was boys only. But it was all right.
You speak so well. I mean, it's interesting that you haven't got a particular accent. Is that something that came from family and school, or is it something that you've honed as part of your acting craft?
No. It's just I speak. This is how I speak. This is how I sound. I suppose it's just inherited. It's just sort of English commuter belt kind of accent, I guess. And the funny thing is that when I living in America for so long, once you're in America and people discover your English, they're fascinated by the accent. So even though I haven't consciously worked on it, I'm aware of it. I'm aware of it as a thing because so often in the States people would remark on it.
Wait till you see how fascinated they are in America with the Australian accent.
I bet they are. Yes.
So if my memory serves me correctly, you're quite a fan of music. Does your musical likes and passion, does that start from your childhood, from a parental influence at all, or did that come later?
My mother listened to classical music a lot. I mean, we had Radio 3, which was the British, still is the British BBC classical channel, and that was on quite a lot. My father wasn't interested in it at all, but it was a presence in the house. And then, of course, there was pop music that people were exposed to just in the culture, So I got into pop music, people like Roxy Music, Kate Bush, and people like that, which I really liked. I was also at school, I was in the choir, which was a touring choir. During the summers, we would go on a tour of the sort of Midlands, really, in a coach. I sort of didn't really love it because who wants to be in their school uniform during the summer holidays when everybody else is, in Naples on a beach somewhere, and we're being carted around cathedrals in the Midlands. But it does expose you to good music. And also the other thing is I don't think we're a very good choir. Thank God there are no recordings. As far as I know, I'm aware there are no recordings. But nonetheless, because our school had some relationship with the Church of England, they were able to arrange these tours of Lincoln Cathedral and all these other. And I know I sung in Chichester Cathedral. I think I sung in Westminster Abbey once. But the great thing about that is it does give you exposure to music that's not otherwise easily discovered. And when I got really interested in Benjamin Britten's music later on, when probably about late 20s, early 30s, and began to listen to Britten's operas and stuff, some of the language was already there because we'd sung Britten. Again, I don't think we sang it very well, but we'd sung it. So that it wasn't strange or alien because I already knew something about it, just because we'd sung Rejoice in the Lamb is a piece we sung. So it does, it's one of the great things about it does expose you to art that's not so easily discovered naturally. Just the culture doesn't introduce you to this stuff. You have to find it one way or another. And a musical education of that kind does expose you to the richness of all sorts of music and the wide range of music. And that's the astonishing thing, as you know, is just how much music there is in the world and what a variety of it is all over the planet, different forms of musical expression. But all human beings seem to be drawn to some kind of musical expression. It seems to be something in our makeup.
It's very hard to sing Benjamin Britten well anyhow. It's such difficult music.
Well, I don't have much technical knowledge, but I think it's there's a novelist actually, Garth Greenwell, who just said very recently he's a big fan of Britten, and he was saying Britten's not only one of the great composers of the 20th century, he's one of its great readers. So it's fascinating because he set these incredible texts. And Garth Greenwell discovered Henry James through Britten's setting of The Turn of the Screw. There's all this great poetry. Britten set Thomas Hardy. He set old, ancient, 1,000-year-old verses. He set some of the great Victorian, but he set Jeremiah Hopkins. So all these texts. E.M. Forster wrote a libretto for him, which was adapted from a Herman Melville novel. So that one of the things that Britten does is he exposes you to some of the best literature in the world. And most great composers tend to set mediocre texts, including, Schubert's. The texts that Schubert set weren't great texts. They were okay, and he made something beautiful out of them, but they weren't great texts. The thing about Britten is that he chose brilliant text all the time. And about 50% of his work is for voice and words and voice. So a huge part of his output is about language and about the variety of language that great artists can produce. So Britten not only exposes you to music, exposes you to literature. You discover all sorts of stuff. Arthur Rimbaud, the French poet, he did a brilliant setting of about a dozen of Arthur Rimbaud's poems. So it's just all this stuff that you get from him. It's incredibly rich. If you like that kind of thing, it's just incredibly exciting. And often, as with Garth Greenwell saying, it is sometimes the way you discover somebody. My first hearing of Rimbaud was through Britten's setting of Les Illuminations, or Les Illuminations, if we're going to pronounce it in the French way.
That's done. Yeah, I know. Okay, well, we did talk to us about Benjamin Britten more. The thing I find about Britten is all his work is so unique, and so you don't regularly hear similar themes across these different works. I love Andrew Lloyd Webber, but every musical, you could fit any song into any show and it wouldn't matter. Where Benjamin Britten's stuff is so distinct that it's, Oh, that's an interesting question. In terms of childhood, I mean, I know that you used to watch Doctor Who. What were the TV shows and influences you were having as a child?
Oh, well, Doctor Who was my favourite show. In our house, Doctor Who was my programme, in inverted commas. It was the show that I watched in a dedicated way. So Doctor Who was always officially, when I was, from about the age of 5 or 6, it was officially my favourite programme. It was a programme that I wouldn't miss, or it would be a great trauma if I did miss it. But yeah, all the usual stuff, basically. I mean, Thunderbirds, all of those Jerry Anderson ones I loved as a boy. Show Saffron Steel was a show. Do you remember? Did you get Saffron Steel in Australia? I think that was. In fact, Saffron Steel's interesting because that's a show that I got when it came out on VHS, and I've got on DVD as well, because I just think it's beautiful and really odd and highly inventive. But that came on was about 14 or 15 that made a huge impact. It's just so strange, and I hate to use the word dreamlike because it's a bit of a cliche, but nonetheless, that's how Saffron Steel actually feels. It feels like walking through dreams. It's one of the strangest shows ever made, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant, and I still think it's really, really, really odd and really cool. So programs like that, and of course comedies. Everybody in Britain liked Dad's Army in those days. I don't know. Did Dad's Army get sent over to Australia? And of course there was 40 Towers and all those kind of things.
Yeah, all the sitcoms. To the Man Aboard, we had all the sitcoms. But
To the Man Aboard, well, To the Man Aboard is actually really the Man Aboard is still funny.
Yes,
a lot of old sitcoms aren't funny anymore. The thing about To the Man Aboard is actually still really witty.
Yeah,
that's a wonderful program. Yeah.
So how did you get into acting? From what was the decision to go into acting?
I was always wanted to be an actor, and I'd done sort of drama classes and sort of all, again, from quite young, and I was in plays and that kind of stuff. So it felt like what I wanted to do. And then I fell into it quite quickly, just through luck, really, as these things are always mainly to do with being in the right place at the right time. But it's always something I was interested. I like Shakespeare. I always thought, if I hadn't been for Doctor Who, I always thought what I would probably have been would be in a sort of classical character actor, comes who plays little parts in Shakespeare and that kind of thing. So I think that's a lot of what talent I have. I think is in some ways sort of classical, to do with rhythm of language and all that kind of stuff. And I do like Shakespeare. I reread Shakespeare about 10 years ago. I decided to reread the entire thing. So I made Friday. We were still in New Haven, Connecticut. I made Friday Shakespeare Day, so I'd take one of the plays down to one of the coffee shops in New Haven, because New Haven's Yale, so it's like Oxford, really. Yeah. It's a very studenty kind of place. So it's quite easy to go to a coffee shop and sit quietly reading Shakespeare, because other people are doing it. You've got these students, these very brainy kids intensely reading something or doing something on their laptops in silence, just with a little cup of coffee and that. So I reread all of the plays about 10 years ago. And the main thing is, once you get away from, Shakespeare is the greatest writer ever, once you get away from those cliches and just read it, you just sit there thinking, this guy's an incredible writer. You just literally, that's just amazing. You actually sit there exactly the way you might read a modern writer who thinks really good. You just sit, this is just amazing. It's just an amazing phrase. That's an amazing image, an amazing moment. Mm. So if you're unpretentious about it and just read it, you realise this is just astonishing stuff. There is a reason why people have been fascinated by it for 500 years, not because it's boring, because it's completely brilliant. It's fascinating to do. So I was kind of interested in that.
You've been in a lot of Shakespeare. I think you've done 5 or 6 plays. I think you played Hamlet as well, didn't you?
I once, bizarrely, yes. Bizarrely, I was cast as, it wasn't my idea, but I was cast as a fringe Hamlet, which I actually did do because I thought, well, nobody else is ever going to ask me to do it, so I'm not going to not do it. But it was a fascinating experience. But I've done some bits of Shakespeare.
So what was your process like? Because how old were you when you did Hamlet? How long ago was that? That was a long time ago?
Oh, ages ago. 30.
So when you were reading 10 years ago, how's your thought process with Shakespeare and just something like Hamlet changed?
Well, completely. When I reread it, yes, I would have done it completely differently. But that's the thing about it, though. It's infinite, isn't it? Something like King Lear, one of the interesting things about Shakespeare, even though in some ways it's very full, there are lots of spaces for interpretation. That's why everybody's version of any character is so different. With a character like King Lear, the degree to which King Lear has dementia is up to the actor or the director. You can decide the degree, how far gone he is. And what was he like as a king before? He was some kind of bully. How thuggish was he? Those are questions that the piece leaves open to the actor. So even though there's a lot to it, there's a lot of space for people to make decisions, which is why every King Lear that's ever been done comes out completely differently. Branagh's done, I haven't seen it, but Kenneth Branagh's done a King Lear, I think in New York or something, where he was quite sort of tough and together. Whereas Ian McKellen's King Lear, when I saw it, is kind of withered and old and decaying. And all both those things are possible. It's so full of endless possibility. All those characters are. Mm. It's just astounding, and that's why actors love doing them, isn't it? Because, and particularly great actors, and
So your first professional work was in the BBC production of To Serve Them All My Days with John Duttine.
To Serve Them All My Days, yes.
Which we did get happy too, because we got everything. So I do. I mean, I remember the production. I mean, I've gone back since and watched you in it. I think as I watched the show originally as a kid, I wouldn't have remembered you particularly in it as such. Though I do remember being traumatised by Beth's death at the end of episode 2, episode 3. So it's one of those shows that actually did live on in my head considerably. And I actually went and read the book after watching the series, which was a chore for a 12-year-old or something.
Yeah, I got a feeling. I mean, what was it, R.F. Delderfield?
Yeah.
There was a fashion for a brief period where the BBC seemed to adapt all these novels that aren't very good novels. But not very good novels can make quite good TV.
Yeah.
And they got that Andrew Davis, he's the guy who showed Bottoms in Jane Austen.
Yeah.
20 years later, the adapter Andrew Davis. And of course he did Peter Davison's series, A Very Peculiar Practice, was written by Andrew Davis. So he was the kind of guy who was good at not only adapting masterpieces like Jane Austen, but also at turning a slightly plodding and not very good novel into a very good television series, which I think it was. I've never seen it, actually, except for the episode that I was in. I didn't actually go on watching it, so I don't actually know much about it. Actually, I think I saw bits of it afterwards, because there's certainly a famous moment where a character dies in a deck chair, which I remember. But I think I remember because I actually saw it being shot. But I didn't see it from beginning to end.
I always loved John Duttine, because he sort of had a period of time where he was such a great actor. I mean, he was a great actor, but in terms of he did the Day of the Triffids, a number of things. I was always thinking he would make the perfect Doctor. I was always thinking that they might have cast him, but alas, no. So how did you get the role in To Serve Them All My Days?
Simply, I was actually. I've been in touch with the casting director. I was working at the BBC in their news information department, which I did only for about 2 months. But I just, I needed a job, and I wrote off the BBC, and they took me to which is a real clerky, labouring stuff. It's just cutting up newspapers. Every day the newspapers would arrive, and these people upstairs would go through marking what files each article would go into. So, if Margaret Thatcher met Ronald Reagan in Sydney, then that would probably be that article would be reproduced 3 times and probably go in the Sydney file, the Reagan file, and the Thatcher file. So they made the decisions, and then we in the miserable little dark room downstairs would cut these articles out and put them in a file. That's what it entailed. And funny enough, we were at Lime Grove, but only a 20-minute walk away was TV Centre, where there was other people doing exactly the same thing. They had a news information department as well, and they were sitting there cutting up newspapers as well, keeping exactly the same filing system 20 minutes away, reproducing the same filing system 20-minute walk away from where we were at Lime Grove. But one felt it was very exciting in a sense, because it was just nice to be working for the BBC, because it made you feel important, basically. Anybody who's worked in those days, anybody who worked for the BBC felt above average, just because. I work for the BBC. Oh, what do you do? Oh, you work for. Oh, you work for Woolworths. Oh, well, yeah. I'm at the BBC team. Yes. So even if it was a really boring job, you felt a bit above average just because you were able to boast to your friends that you worked for the BBC. But anyway, so I was around. So anyway, they were looking for kids to play or young people to play public school boys in this serial. So for some reason, I didn't know her, I'd never met her, but I sent her my photograph, and so they brought me in, and then they gave me the part of this boy called Brierley, who's is it his father or his brother or somebody who's killed in World War I? Anyway, that's his little moment. It's a John Duttine character has to come and tell him the bad news, and it's lots of glycerine tears and all that kind of stuff.
Did you enjoy it? It was a good experience.
It was thrilling, but very weird, because I was really thrown into it as a completely new. I didn't know what a professional rehearsal was like. I'd never done one. I'd never been to a rehearsal room. I didn't know about the structure of the day in the studio. How you would arrive for 10 and run it, and then you'd do more running in the afternoon, and then you'd record it in the evening. Studio days were very long days. I didn't know that. I didn't actually know how these days worked. It was all discovery. It was all a completely new world. And I remember, because I was so nervous, I got to the rehearsal room the first day about an hour early, because I didn't know what to do. So I just turned up. I thought it better do it really early. So I was sitting around the rehearsal room for an hour before anybody else turned up. But it was tremendously bizarre, and it was fun. I went on location to somewhere in Dorset, and there were a couple of very nice young actors who were very nice to me, and we larked about. Nicholas Lyndhurst and Simon Gibbs Kent and me became a sort of little trio of people who would go around and.
It's a pretty amazing cast. I mean, the three of you always on to very big other productions.
Well, I mean, Nicholas is an amazing actor. I mean, he's one of the best, he's turned into one of the best comic actors in Britain. And Simon did some amazing work. And then I fell into Doctor Who. So, yeah, it all went in different ways. It went, certainly, I don't know if it went well for Simon exactly, but in the end. But for Nicholas, it went very well, and for me, it's gone quite well. So it's all been quite nice. It's all been quite lucky, really. It's funny because it's such a difficult world. Being an actor is great if you can make a go of it, but it's really hard. It's a really difficult thing, and it's just great when something wonderful happens to a person and it goes all right, and it's amazing, really.
And so, how did Doctor Who come about from there?
Well, because I actually, when I was at News Information, when we were cutting up newspapers, one of the people from upstairs pointed out, because they knew I was a Doctor Who fan, they pointed out this little sort of one-paragraph article saying they were looking for a sort of Artful Dodger type to be a new companion. And because I had contact with this casting director, because I was going to go to do So All My Days, I'd been cast. I said, will you put me up for this? I'd love to be in Doctor Who. Would you put me up? I think I could be an Artful Dodger type of character. So would you put me up for this? And she did. And then, so that's how it happened. And then Nathan Turner called me in along with, a large number of other people, and then called me back. And then they offered me the job. One of these things that happens is things that are really life-changing happen very quickly. 1 minute I was into So All My Days and I didn't know what would happen after So All My Days. I'd had to leave the BBC because, I would have been away for too long to just treat it as a holiday. So I had no clue what would happen. And then suddenly I was in Doctor Who very quickly. I met Nathan Turner, met him again. It all happened in 3 or 4 days. These things that change your whole life, actually occur extremely quickly. And suddenly everything's different.
So did you have to keep quiet for very long? Did you have to keep it secret for very long that you were in it?
Yeah, no, I don't think I was actually asked to keep it secret in a big way. But of course, back then there was no internet, so you could tell people without it suddenly being all over the place.
Yeah.
So no, but I think once they cast me, they started. I think I did a photo shoot fairly soon after I'd been cast. Nathan Turner loved having articles in newspapers. He was obsessed with publicity and that and photo shoots and all this kind of stuff.
So how soon?
I don't remember having to keep it up.
How soon before you met Tom and Lala? You didn't do a screen test with them at all? No.
No. I was very surprised. No, they didn't do that kind of thing then, or at least they didn't on Doctor Who. No, Nathan Turner just brought me in. No, I met John, and then I met Chris Bidmead, the script editor, and Peter Moffat, the director of the first one we did, which was A State of Decay, because we recorded them out of order. So I met them. I never met Tom, no, or Lala. I met Lala a couple of weeks later because she was in the bar at the TV centre while I was still doing To Serve Them All My Days. So I was up there having a drink with Simon and Nicholas, and I think Simon, of course, had done a Doctor Who earlier, so he knew her. So he just went over to say hello. And the funny thing is, because we were in our costumes, so we were in school uniforms, because that's what we were wearing in So All My Days. So I think she thought I was a schoolboy, as opposed to an actor in a costume. I think she just assumed I was a schoolboy. But it was very nerve-wracking, because I knew who they were and because I really loved the programme. It was a very strange and frightening moment to meet her, I have to say. With good reason. And then of course the first day of rehearsal, when I met Tom for the first time, who I vividly remember arriving late. He arrived late to the read-through that morning. But yeah, it was all very, very intense and very strange. and surreal. The main thing about falling into a job like that, if you like the program as I had, is just how strange it is. How odd that you suddenly end up in this program, and you're suddenly receiving a script by Terence Dicks. It was more than anything. It was very exciting. It was very frightening, but more than anything, it was really strange because it was a really odd thing to happen.
Mm. It was a great first script with State of Decay and written by Terence Dicks, and yeah, but yes, suddenly.
Well, of course, and if you like Doctor Who, if you read Target books, and suddenly you've got a script by Terence Dicks, it's so completely, oh my God, I'm in Doctor Who. I mean that's the real thing, isn't it? I mean, it's by Terence Dicks, and nobody's going to say, well, it's not really Doctor Who. That's the real thing. You're in Doctor Who. It's Terence Dicks' script, for God's sake. That vampire one, which apparently had been in development for years and years and years and years. Because he'd wanted that after the Brain of Morbius, they were going to follow it up with this sort of variant on Dracula, having done Frankenstein, and then they were BBC Drama Plays, the serious plays division was doing a version of Dracula. So they actually got in touch with the Doctor Who office and said, whatever you do, don't do a vampire story because we're doing this serious, heavy version of Dracula. We don't want a sort of Monster of the Week version of it. So they had to put it into abeyance for a long time until John Nathan Turner dug it out again. It's great though. I loved it. I thought it was great. I love that ending where the tower turns out to be a rocket.
Yeah.
It's great. Not on all those sort of bats taken from. I think they were taken from David Attenborough documentaries. I think the shots of bats and all that kind of stuff. It was wonderful. That was Baker's favourite story from that season, was State of Decay.
Yeah, no,
and I can see why.
I can see why too. I think it's probably not my favourite of the season too. So in terms of getting to know your character, I mean, you were told Artful Dodger originally. Do you think that what your original idea of what the character was going to be like? Do you think that's what he became?
No, it was an odd comedy. It was the combination of the Artful Dodger and the mathematical genius. I think State of Decay is basically the Artful Dodger. Because Terence wrote the script from a very basic outline of my character, literally a paragraph, a character breakdown. I don't think there's much in the way of mathematics in it. The mathematics thing is more in full circle, even though that was made later. Of course, it's the first actual story in broadcast order. So I think the character felt slightly different in Terence's story, partly also because Chris Bidmead had done a big rewrite of it, which Peter Moffat the director hadn't liked, so they went back to an earlier draft. They went back to a draft that Peter Moffat had read some months earlier. So I think that's one of the reasons why the character feels slightly different. Though I think it's perfectly acceptable. I mean, the difference is acceptable in one person. One person can be different one day and from the next. I think it's perfectly conceivable that one person can have all those qualities. But the idea of a cerebral character sort of developed sort of across those stories, and certainly by the time you get to Logopolis, then you're talking about a plainly extremely intellectual, extremely cerebral character. And it's really interesting because in modern terms, there's something neurodiverse about him. That's one of the really fascinating things about it. Bidmead creates a neurodiverse character, which I think you'd say now, 20 years before the term existed. That's just an amazing thing, really. And in fact, the mathematician after whom Adric is named, a Swiss-English mathematician called Paul Dirac, he was himself neurodiverse. So there's neurodiversity in the actual inspiration of the character. But nobody would ever see it that way then, because that language didn't exist. But now when people watch it, they see the character that way. And I've had this conversation with parents of neurodiverse children who have said how completely real that Adric is, how really like neurodiverse child, brilliant, a gifted neurodiverse boy actually is like. So it's great. And it's something that, this sort of odd thing that Bidmead achieves with that idea, creating something that's so unusual. But then 20 years later, you sort of see, oh, that's what it is. That's what that character is. And that's an amazing thing on his part. But that's definitely a part of his quality, I think, as the series goes on, that sense of a neurodiverse character.
Do you feel as an actor did you have much control over the character, or was it very much you just had to deal with the scripts as they came? How much control do you feel you had on the
You have no control. No actor has control in that sense, and certainly not a very young actor. Because frankly, if I said something, they almost certainly wouldn't have listened to it anyway. So no, the scripts are the scripts, and you have to that's all you can do. You just play the script. You don't really have control over it. Do they begin to write towards the actor as they get to know you? I think perhaps they do. I think they always do. Because the characters are quite thin, and some of the sense of the character comes out of not the actors. Well, it depends on. Sometimes it's a personality thing, where it's just the actor is a sort of doing and the Doctor Who companion is their personality. But sometimes it's a character isn't their personality, is a fictional character, is an acted character. A fictional character who is not the actor himself, but will have some quality, some sense of the actor, some quality of the actor that writers might pick up and think, oh, that's interesting, or that's something we can do something with. But I myself am not controlling it. I'm not, we don't sit around. I don't sit in a room with Chris Bidmead and Johnny Byrne discussing the character, where I think he would go. That didn't exist. I don't think it ever really exists. Maybe it exists if you're the leading, the headline character. But even there, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean,
did it feel to you like the character changed between Tom and Peter? Was there a different dynamic between?
Oh yeah, the dynamic. Yes, yes, the atmosphere. And the thing about Tom's last group, is it's so heady. It's the most cerebral bunch of characters ever. You've got the Doctor, you've got Romana, you've got Adric, and in a sense, you could include K9 as well. These incredibly cerebral, brainy people. All brilliant, all massively egotistical in their different ways. And that sort of tension, there's a kind of electricity in it. When I've seen them, I've often been struck by how intense that group is, of these brilliant people with huge egos, all together, getting along, but they're all pretty pleased with themselves. It's very intense. It also kind of makes sense for a character like the Doctor to be surrounded by very intelligent people. So I think it rings true. I think it's quite a truthful thing. And of course, I've always thought his relationship with Adric, for Adric is a kind of love story, because having been bored out of his mind on Alzarius, he's suddenly in the company of this very exciting person who's absolutely brilliant. So I think that's a kind of, sort of hero worship kind of thing. And for the Doctor, it's recognizing himself in the boy, because Adric is so obviously the kind of boy that the Doctor almost certainly was. Except I think that the Doctor was probably more of a nightmare. I've got a feeling the Doctor was a much more difficult 15-year-old than Adric is. My suspicion is that he would have been a bit of a nightmare. But he recognises that in him. And that's where that relationship comes from, particularly in the two stories where it's just Tom and I, Logopolis and Keeper of Traken. And that's very much it. It's really quite sweet, and there's nothing else quite like it. I don't think there's any other relationship quite like it in Doctor Who. But I think it's a legitimate and really interesting relationship for both of them. What happens when Peter arrives is everything changes, because you get a new script editor. Actually, for two new script editors, you have this bizarre thing where we got this one-off script editor I've never understood. I don't understand how. I'm sure somebody out there knows, but I don't know why we suddenly ended up. Terence Dudley wrote this thing called Fort of Doomsday with this young man who was literally came in script edited this one program, this one serial, and disappeared. Went off into the land of TV and eventually became some big executive or something. And then Eric Saywood was suddenly the script editor. So you have this. That's why Fort of Doomsday is such an odd one, because it's not only a writer, Terence Dudley, who's not an obvious choice for Doctor Who, and then the script editor who's just doing this one thing, presumably doesn't really know the characters. He doesn't really know who Adric is. So you get this slightly different version, and then suddenly Saywood is there. Saywood, I think, got it right. I thought Fort of Doomsday doesn't quite get that character right. I don't hate it. I like it as a series. I think they're all those series I like, and they're very good. And it's beautifully directed as well. I think Fort of Doomsday is very well made. But he doesn't quite get the character right, I don't think. But that's partly because you've got a script editor who doesn't know it. If that had been Bidmead, if Bidmead had script edited Fort of Doomsday, I think it would have been probably a better result. I think
Terence was a writer who'd come across from All Creatures, just like Peter had come across as well. So maybe he was a little bit constricted by the Tristan character and sort of was looking at it that way.
Well, yeah, he might well have been. Yeah. And of course, that's interesting because, of course, 40 Doomsday was the first Fifth Doctor serial we recorded. So Peter's very much figuring out, what am I going to do with this? That's where all the focus was, quite understandably. That's where the focus was, is, we've got this new Doctor, he's coming in. What are we going to do? What choices is the actor going to make with his version of the Doctor? And you're right, because Terence Dudley did come in from All Preachers, didn't he?
Mm. At this stage...
And the other big...
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, no.
Well, at this stage, are you 19, 20? How old are you? You're still very young, aren't you?
18.
18.
I think, but I was probably 19 by the time we get to 40 Doomsday. I was cast at 18, so I was playing much younger, of course.
Yeah.
I was a young man playing a boy. Because that's a very important thing about that character, is he is a boy. He's not Jamie. Jamie is a young man.
Yeah.
He is supposed to be 14 or 15. So he is a boy. He is an adolescent. He's alien, of course, so he's not a human boy. He's an alien boy. In fact, very alien. He's biologically alien. We know from his first stories, one of the very few Doctor Who stories where we know something about their biology. We know he's got Marshman DNA in him. We know he's got spider DNA in him. This is an alien person. I always get a bit irritated when alien Doctor Who characters become humanized, where people lose the sense that these people aren't actually human. Which again, I think is something that 40 Doomsday slightly loses. I think lose the sense that this boy is simply not a human boy. He's alien in all respects. He's biologically alien. If you cut into him, you're not going to find human inside. You would find something, just as you cut into the Doctor and you find two hearts, you find something that's not human. You're going to find something not human in Adric, because he's biologically alien. And this is not ambiguous. It's established in his first story. It's a fact that he's alien. And I always think the alienness matters. If you're going to have an alien character, you want the element of alienness to be a part of it.
Mm. So as an 18, 19-year-old, you're working on a new craft of acting, which is hugely complex and time-consuming. The environment is less than, some of the times, as easygoing as it could be. How are you juggling all that in terms of, coming to adulthood, trying to perfect a craft? Was it a difficult time or an exciting time? How were you finding it all?
It was mainly exciting. I mean, the script, I really liked the material. But the first year was difficult. Tom was difficult. And he's been perfectly open about this. It's not a secret. I'm not sort of announcing something to the world that people don't know. It's generally known. And Lala, they were having this relationship, which really, I mean, it's really up to them to talk about. But if you witnessed them on the East Space trilogy, the idea that then wandered off and got married was absolutely bizarre. I mean,
we've all watched Decay. We've watched them on that show. We can see it in the show.
You can pick the recording block based on whether he looks at her or not. Because
well, yes, that's a bit. Yeah, I know people think that's really funny. It is funny, but I think it's
tragic.
I don't think you should be able to tell what mood the actor is in by what they're doing. I'm not sure that's particularly a good thing. But they obviously just had a row. I don't think that's how you're supposed to be watching it, really. But it was very intense and difficult, and also because of the kind of material it was. A lot of people involved with it didn't really like it. I found that a bit. I understood it, but someone like Peter Grimwade would go on and on and on about what crap it was. And of course, you don't have to like a program to direct it. You have to like EastEnders to be an EastEnders director. It's a job. You can figure it out. You can direct it. You don't have to like it to act in it. If every actor waited around for a dream job, most of them wouldn't do anything. I didn't have to wait very long, but for most, you just take the work that comes. But I found it particularly Grimwade, who not only didn't like Doctor Who, but would go on about how much he didn't like it. And I found that a bit irritating. But then he sort of made the mistake of then trying to write it. And I think that's a problem, because I think, you do have to like, you don't have to like it, you have to have some sense of it to write it. You don't have to like it to direct it or to act in it, but to become a writer of something when you're full of disdain for it, I think that's maybe a bit more difficult thing. And of course, then
we get
Peter produces time. That went well, didn't it? That was fantastic. So I'm quite fond of it, actually. But one of the things I think doing these behind the sofa things that we do is that with classic Doctor Who, I still feel affection for it, and I still quite enjoy it. And even though I think it's really rubbish, I think it's really rubbish in a way I'm quite enjoying. So when we watched Time Flight, which I thought was a mind-blowing, really not great. But I have to say I quite enjoyed watching it. There is something pleasant. I do think that Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who, for me, and it's probably just a generational thing, and even a kind of nostalgia thing, I guess, is even when it wasn't that great, it's still quite not great in a kind of quite enjoyable way. So in a certain way, I quite like Time Flight. I'm quite fond of it. I don't sort of hate it. I sort of have a certain affection for it.
Who was your Doctor?
It was a tough show.
Who was your Doctor? Who?
Oh, all of the 7 Doctors I regard, or the classic Doctors I regard as one character. I'm not just saying that for political reasons. I actually have decided classic Doctor is basically one character, and that is actually correct. That, as Andrew Smith has said, you're always writing the same character. The actor might deliver the lines in a different kind of way. So John Pertwee will flounce in, whereas Patrick will sort of tap his fingers together. But the line will be the same line. It's because what he is he's an investigator. That's what he's doing. He's doing the act of investigating. He's Maid Grey or Poirot. That's what Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who actually is. That's what he does. So I regard them all as variants on the same character. So my view is that you can't have a favourite Doctor because it's all the Doctor. It's all one fictional character. And even though this biological process, this regeneration, where cells that are dying reignite, nonetheless the mind inside is still the same mind. That's how I think it's different on the modern show, where I think each new Doctor is basically a complete reboot, which is because that's how modern television is. But I don't think it ever was. I think, on classic Doctor Who, I think it's still, all of those serials, the Visitation started as a Tom Baker serial. It was going to be a 4th Doctor serial. And so they're all sort of, they all sort of interlock in some way. They're sort of a single piece. Because I think it's the key to it may be just the Doctor Who office. The fact is that throughout those 24 seasons, those 28 years, as I understand it, there was always a Doctor Who office. And people came and went. But there was always some continuity. A producer leaves, but the Doctor stays on. The Doctor leaves, but it's the same companions for a while. And mainly, of course, the key to it, obviously, the writers. You've got Robert Holmes starting in the late 60s. He's still writing for it in the mid-80s when he dies, halfway through writing a script. Terence Dix starts late 60s, still working on it in the 80s. Terry Nation starts 1964, 63 actually. Yes, 63. And his last one is 78, 79. So that's the thing. That's the sort of, it's not a continuity in the sense of being a sort of hermetic universe. Doctor Who didn't work like that because nobody was interested in that. Nobody was interested in what happened 5 years earlier. Nobody worried about whether, are we breaking some rule we established 5 years earlier? Nobody was thinking like that each individual script is an individual piece of work. But the singleness of it, the unity, I think, is the existence of the Doctor Who office. And the people coming and going from it. That's what makes it, in a certain way, a single piece, as far as it could be seen as a single piece. Classic Doctor Who, I think. Does that make sense?
It does.
Or is that just waffle?
No, I'm thinking, gosh, deep, and looking forward to going further.
I was going to ask you why you didn't think that way about the new series, but you did answer that during your explanation. So,
well, I think that we live in a different culture. I mean, classic Doctor Who came from an institution called BBC Drama. It was created to be a tape studio series. That's what it was. It was originated to be that, and that's basically what it was. And once that institution defined BBC drama of all kinds. It comes out of a particular way of thinking. The Doctor Who office was just down the hall from the BBC Shakespeare, which is down the hall from maybe Orchard Great and Small. It's down the hall from, the Dennis Potter plays. It's down the hall from the latest classic novel adaptation, Dickens or something. They're all in the same environment. They're all sort of this cross-current, this crossover thing. So it's a particular culture of a particular institution at a particular time. And that's what Doctor Who's a part of. It's a part of that entity, I think.
We have subscribed to the Sirens of Audio YouTube channel and given the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Why have you not returned our ambassadors?
there's hours more I could talk to you about all this sort of time period and moving on. I want to just jump to some of the audio stuff, which is a big jump forward because you leave Doctor Who, do a lot of theatre work, you change countries. So there's a whole couple of decades I'm going to skip. So my apologies for that. I'm looking forward to chatting with him about those decades later. How did you actually come back to work for Big Finish?
Oh, well, they asked. They asked me right at the beginning. Gary Russell asked me. In fact, I think I may be the first actor they were asked. I think. But anyway, I was very asked right at the beginning. But I thought, I don't know. Because I'd got in theatre, I was so often playing kids. I was still, being cast for The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And I thought, do I want to go and play another cerebral kid? It's all right playing a cerebral kid when you're 18. Do you really want to when you're in your 40s? So I thought, I don't know about that. And because the 2 seasons that Adric is in my opinion, are so good. I think Bidme did an astonishing job with Doctor Who, I think. And I think Saywood also did some very, very nice. It's really good examples of this series. I think those seasons, they're both very good Doctor Who seasons. So I thought, what's it going to be like? Well, okay, it's money, but do I really want to do Doctor Who stories that maybe aren't going to be very good? So I took a long time to say yes to it. I took about 10 years, I think. And then finally, I actually did say to them at one point, cast me in something else. If you cast me in something else, then I'll think about doing Doctor Who. And that actually happened. They cast me in
Dark Shadows.
So-called Dark Shadows, yeah. Which I adore. I discovered in America. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen that. That didn't ever come to Australia, did it?
Dark Shadows never came to Australia. I do know about it, but do you want to talk about what is Dark Shadows and explain it? It's
a mind-blowing deal. It was a daytime soap, 5 days a week. Started out as a kind of gothic, atmospheric, vaguely Hitchcockian, with a bit of Bronte, Jane Eyre in it. This governess goes to this mysterious old house in Maine to be the governess for this difficult child. But then it begins to get more and more supernatural. And then they had the idea, when the show was about to be cancelled after 6 months or whatever, putting in a vampire. Oh, put in a vampire. We've got nothing to lose. And then it takes off like a rocket. And this vampire called Barnabas Collins becomes a great late 60s icon for women watching soap operas at home, but also their kids. It became this huge thing with teenage girls and boys. And Barnabas Collins became a pin-up. And one of the others, David Selby, who's actually had a hit single. His character did a sort of recitation against this atmospheric bit of music, and that actually went into the charts. So it was this huge cultural phenomenon. And they did every kind of horror story. They did a variant on Dracula, which runs through it, because Barnabas Collins is always in it because he was such a big hit. And then they did a werewolf one. They did a version of Frankenstein. They did ghosty stuff. They even did an alien invasion stuff which is bizarre. But it was huge. It did run out of steam because after you've done all the horror stories, there's nothing left except to do them again. I mean... but it had a 5-year run. 5 years, I believe it's 1,225 episodes across 5 years. Classic Doctor Who is about 800 episodes across 28 years. So this is 5 episodes a week. It's fascinating. And a really good cast working under incredibly difficult circumstances where, you get your script the night before. And because the usual cast per episode was 5 actors, so that if you're in an episode, you're probably going to do a lot. You're trying to remember a lot of lines that you only received the night before. But they really create something. It's easy in some ways to sort of snigger about it, but actually they create something rather wonderful. It's a very good cast. And Jonathan Frid, as the vampire, has real presence. So really, the minute he arrives, I know because we've been rewatching it recently, and the minute he arrives, the whole thing does lift. But he also changes the whole vampire narrative. I think Anne Rice said that Barnabas is the most important vampire after Dracula, because he's the first one that changed it. All vampires before Barnabas were Dracula. They were all variants on Dracula. And he's the first one who does it differently, because it's a sympathetic character who doesn't like being a vampire. He's just stuck with it. And that change, and Anne Rice said her vampire novels wouldn't have existed without Dark Shadows. So Jonathan Frid and the Dark Shadows series did actually change something in popular culture. It actually had a lasting effect on how you might write a character who had always previously been written as a straightforward villain. Anyway, it's great fun, and Big Finish got the rights to do it, and they asked me to do one with David Selby, a two-hander, which we did in LA, called The Creeping Fog, and I really enjoyed it. David Selby's a wonder. He plays at one point he's a werewolf. He's also a ghost. Quentin is various things at various times, because there's lots of time travel in Dark Shadows, so that you go back and meet ancestors who are played by the same actor. So all the ongoing cast played various relatives of themselves at various times. There's a stairway through time, a staircase through time. It's pretty weird stuff. But anyway, so we did this, and it was wonderful. So then I thought, well, I really enjoyed that. It was a really good script. So maybe I'll get in touch with the producer, David Richardson, and say, look, all right, I'm open to doing Doctor Who, because I thought this piece you gave me was very good. So then I began doing it, and now I do it, it's pretty much my career. We're all constantly going into the studios to do a new Doctor Who. It's great fun. And it did, I don't want to be gooey or sentimental about it, but it did in a strange way feel like coming home. I know that sounds a bit icky, but actually it really did. That going back to doing Doctor Who as basically a regular thing that we do constantly, there's always something coming up. There's always a new serial on the way. It does feel in a way, oh yeah, all right, I'm back home now. This is after all those 20 years of an excursion somewhere else, but I'm back doing my thing, really. So it's great. And
how did you find getting the voice of Adric again? Did you find that difficult to get back into, or did it take a story or two, or did you get straight back?
I think it happened pretty quickly. I just imagined myself as Adric. And actually, one thing though, I'd already done an audio book. I'd read The Visitation for BBC Audio, the Target book. They, you probably know they've done most anyway of the Target books in audio form. They asked me to do that one. That was the first one I did. And so I'd already done Adric in the context of reading a novel, as well as doing the Fifth Doctor and everybody else, and the Highwayman, which is great fun. It's great fun to play all the characters. But no, so it happened quite quickly. I just immediately imagined, oh, I'm Adric again. I've got my little badge, got brown hair. I'm very brainy. Sometimes I'm not against nicking the odd thing. It all came back I remember quite quickly. It really wasn't that much of a challenge in that sense. It was, yeah, okay, I'm Adric again. There we are. Whoops. It's like when Wonder Woman turns in that program, and suddenly she's wearing her costume again. You know that one?
Yeah.
So it's like that, really. You spin a bit, and then you've become Adric. I'm sure Sarah spins, and suddenly she's Nyssa again. It sort of just happens, really.
Now, have you had a lot of contact over the years with Peter and Janet and Sarah at conventions and things, or not as much?
Well, at conventions, yes. We've always seen each other at conventions here and there, yes. I think we've all gone through phases where we haven't done conventions, where we decided to have time out. Janet, I think, had quite a long period where she didn't do anything. She was running her agent. She had become an actor's agent, and she was taken up by that. And she had never really liked Doctor Who anyway, so I think she, in some ways, wanted to escape it. Sarah, I think, always went to conventions. I don't think she had a time when she actually gave them up. So I'd see her at conventions occasionally, and then Peter occasionally. So, yeah, no, we never sort of... It wasn't ever that years went by without seeing each other. There was always some reason to see each other.
It's also like working with them.
Wasn't that? It's fun. It's fun. I mean, they've got their own characters, but no, it's fun. The Big Finish days are always fun. They are enjoyable. Well, you know Janet as well as very well.
Very well.
She's always rude about the scripts and rude about everything, really, but that's fine. It's all good. It's all good fun. Well, the lovely thing is we get to work with these fantastic actors, because everybody wants to work for Big Finish.
Yep.
I think Jason Hegelian worked out that they'd created like 7,000 or 8,000 acting jobs across those years. Some of them ongoing parts like us, but also one-offs. And sometimes fantastic actors come in. We did one with Sam West. We did one recently with Celia Imrie. So these wonderful actors want to come in, and they actually want to do it. Sarah did a two-hander with Derek Jacobi. I mean, not many actors get to do a two-hander with Derek Jacobi. It's quite rare. That's quite special. It's not like being in something with Derek Jacobi. It's like, it's just the two of us. We're doing it's all just the two of us creating this entire thing. He's one of the best actors in the world, and Sarah it's just loving working with one of the best actors in the world, so people want to work for Big Finish. So it's very exciting. And I make a point of not reading the cast list, so I like turning up and being surprised. Oh my God, it's Celia Imrie. I like that of not actually knowing who it is.
Right.
Now the only difficulty with that is because I'm not a huge telly person, so there are lots and lots of people who don't recognise. I keep turning up and working with household names. I haven't got a clue who they are. We did one with a very lovely woman from Only Fools and Horses. I've never seen Only Fools and Horses. I don't actually know who she is. Just I thought, she's a very nice woman. Who is she? But apparently she's one of the most famous faces in Britain. And she was in a sitcom for like 25 years or something. But I didn't know. So that happens.
Now, you did a season also with Tom Baker and Lala Ward, though I'm not sure whether any of you were in the same studio together.
Oh, yeah, I was in the same studio, yeah.
Oh, who were you working with?
I did 2 with Tom and 2 with Lala.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I said I'd want to be in the studio with both of them, but the only way of doing that is by I did 2 where I was with Tom in Tonbridge, near Tunbridge Wells, and then 2 with Lala and John Leeson in London.
Okay.
I wouldn't do it if we weren't able to be in the same room together. I don't think I would do it. I wouldn't.
Right. So how did things go with Tom? Because I mean,
it was fine. It was fine. It was quite fun. I mean, he's not an easy man. He's still Tom. Yeah, he's not. It's not easy. But it was. Yeah, no, it was fun, and I think they're good. I think they're good serials.
Yeah, they're fantastic. It's a fantastic season. I was curious how it worked. I knew that Lala and Tom wouldn't be in the same space together, and so I was just trying to work out where you fitted in the whole scheme of things. But that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I did both.
One of craft. No, my favourite thing you've actually done is Shilling and Sixpence.
Do you look good? Nigel, I'll tell Nigel Fairsack, he'll be really pleased. Yeah, that has a real following. People love it. And of course, that's Celia Imrie again, and David Warner. Fantastic actor.
Yeah.
They are. That's another thing. I like being asked to do something a bit different occasionally. And I play this sort of young man, this slightly
arrogant RP.
Arrogant, very RP. Yes. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, people really do like that, and it's one of those sort of little things that just quietly
simmers away,
gets made, and quietly appeals to people, and they really enjoy it. They always do well. So I'm glad. Yeah, no, I'm glad you listened to that. That they're super fun. They're super fun because Nigel Fairs has been writing, mystery stories for actors for years, because he had a thing where he would do mystery stories on trains where you literally come and the audience solve the mystery. And they were very high. They were slightly in the style of Shilling and Sixpence. They're very heightened, quite comic and quite camp. So Nigel's written dozens of plays of that kind. So Shilling and Sixpence was very much in the world that he was already familiar with and enjoyed writing, and had some success writing. And yeah, it's great. And he was thrilled when Celia Imrie said yes, and David Warner said yes. He was absolutely thrilled to have actors of that quality who wanted to do his material.
It was the whole cast. I mean, I think Louise Jameson. I mean, everyone who was in that was just, and it was also heightened, and they couldn't work out.
It is.
It's both chilling and scary and whodunity, but also so funny. Like
exactly, that's that combination. It's really kind of unique.
Yeah.
Yes, it's dark, but really bizarre and stylized and pitched at a very high level, and quite camp. I think we can allow ourselves to use the word camp to describe Shilling and Sixpence, as well as being many other things, of course.
Yeah, well, you've had because with the Bloodlust series with Shilling and Sixpence and the Doctor Who, you get quite a diverse range of characters.
Yeah, and again, Bloodlust. Yeah, Bloodlust. They cast me as an absolute bastard. This sort of this tabloid journalist who's absolutely awful. He was great. I loved, and he's the nephew of the guy in The Creeping Fog. We decided he's not his son because we think that the guy in The Creeping Fog is in love with Quentin, even though he tries to kill him. That he's in love with him. So we decided he's gay. So it's not. So therefore, the guy in Bloodlust is his nephew. That was what we decided. But really a monster, but a wonderful character to play, and a character completely different from playing a character like Adric. That's fun. That's fun of acting, isn't it? You play different people that are different than you, fictional characters that are different than you are. That's the fun of it, really, the fun of acting.
Another role you got to play with Big Finish was as a writer, because I'm a huge fan of the audio novels, and you wrote the second one that was released called Watchers. Now, you've done some writing before, but how did that come about? And is there a difference between writing just a standard novel or something specifically written for audio? Is there a difference?
For me, you wouldn't be surprised as an actor that when I write, I speak the words aloud anyway. So even if it's like I wrote a short story for a Doctor Who book called The Target Storybook, which is how I started writing Doctor Who material. And even though that was for the eye, it was a physical book, I spoke it all when I was writing it. So I could act all the scenes. So Watchers and then Prisoners of London are an extension of that. So it doesn't make a huge difference to the extent that I think about voice anyway when I write. Blue Box Boy I did as well. I constantly spoke the lines. I think all good writing ought to be speakable. So that's just how I work. So to that extent, it's not different. Though, of course, you do have the thing that you have to allow for special effects and music with an audio. It's not just going to be my voice droning on for 5 hours, whatever it was. It's going to have color and things added, all sorts of color and shades added to it through the sound design. But it was wonderful. But yeah, it was because people had liked the story in the Target Storybook, that led to Big Finish asking me if I would be open to writing a novel, and I said yes. And then they asked me to write another novel immediately. Prince of London was actually started before Watchers was released. So I went straight into it. So it's interesting because I had a 3-year period where most of my working life was writing these 2 Doctor Who novels. And that's amazing if you think I was on TV in Doctor Who for 2 years. So that gives some perspective to how much these novels took over my life. Because you live with the characters and the situation, and it's just in your head all the time. So that was 3 years where mainly I was thinking about Doctor Who in a long-term way as a fictional piece. Who are these characters? Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? What do they behave like when they're there? What is the crisis that reveals them or reveals something more about them? The 2 children, because I like the 2 children, I like writing them. In Prisoners of London, they get very intense stuff because I think this is really interesting to put them in a genuine situation of terror and crisis. In Prisoners of London, they both think they're kidnapped by this psychotic young man. And he's kidnapped the wrong people. And they know that when he discovers that he's kidnapped the wrong people, what's he going to do? So they don't think they're going to get out of this hut that they're in alive. So that gives you a chance to really reveal elements of character between Adric and Nyssa, which is a relationship I really like and think is interesting. So acting the scenes happens all the time with me with writing, even if it's for the eye. But
because of course with those you didn't just write them, you did perform them as well. And particularly with Watchers, I loved your 4th Doctor. It was awesome.
Thank you. I love playing. I do like both those doctors. I love playing those doctors. But it's a weird thing, Doctor Who companions can always play their doctors. It's really bizarre. Apparently Purvis does quite a good William Hart.
Does a great one.
Fraser does
fantastic Hartnell. Yeah.
Fraser's good. Katie does a good John.
Yeah.
I can do Tom. I can do Peter. I think Bonnie does a really good Sylvester, actually, and so does Sophie. I don't know. I've even done Colin just for one scene at the end of Prison of London. There's a little glimmer of Colin who appears right in the last little sort of addendum bit. It's a weird thing that Doctor Who companions can impersonate their doctors. I'm not sure that the reverse is true. I'm not convinced that Tom Baker could do an impersonation of Adric or of Sarah Jane Smith.
I'm not sure Tom could do anything except Tom anyway.
Well, certainly he's cornered the market in Tom, let's face it.
So I guess the 5th Doctor's got that sort of that breathlessness characteristic about him that always comes through in his voice. What are some of the characteristics of the 4th and 5th Doctors that always are in your mind to project when you're performing them?
Well, apart from the sort of voice and speech rhythm, it's the Fourth Doctor's slightly more detached, isn't he? The Fourth Doctor is actually not shocked by violence. He may be on the side of good, but he's perfectly capable of walking through a room full of corpses without blinking. But yes, you've got that manner, and you've got that sort of slightly booming thing, though you don't want to overdo the booming. I think I try not to get too sort of boomy about it. But yes, I always think of the wide eyes, and that he has that particular gesture, which he sometimes does. And I find that when I'm actually playing him, I do this gesture. Romana. And with Peter, yes, it's all kind of faster and breathier and a bit more flustered and yet in control at the same time. But yes, I do. I picture them. I mean, I'm a visual person anyway. I when I read just for my own interest, I read pictorially. I read in imagery a great deal. I'm very just how my mind works. So I see things quite clearly. And part of the job of writing, of course, is seeing things and then putting on the page or into the voice so that other people see them as well. That's part of what the magic of making fiction is exactly that. You put these pictures into people's head, these scenes, so that people are walking. It's not just a statement that says the Doctor walked through a room. You want the listener to see the character walking through a room. When a Dalek walks in, you want the listener to see the Dalek walking. Daleks don't walk. But when a Dalek rolls in, you want the listener to see the Dalek rolling in. So it's creating that imagery, it's creating pictures. That's what fiction and drama, audio drama do. They give you, they're films in a way, they're movies, or television programs, if you like, in sound. But you're still trying to get that pictorial aspect to it. So I'm always picturing them. I picture Peter stalking about the place and Tom. Yeah.
There was one story from Big Finish years ago that really sticks in my mind. It was written by A.K. Benedict. I don't know if you remember, but it was called The Lost Resort. And it gave Adric a really nice final send-off that you never really got in Earthshock. It sort of ended really quickly, and then the TARDIS crew sort of got on with things. But do you recall The Lost Resort and the kind of...
It's the one where he's already dead.
Yes.
They're in a hospital. Yes, they're in a hospital between life and death.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, I do. That's a very hard... That sort of fantasy, metaphysical thing is quite hard to do in Doctor Who. Because Doctor Who, we do understand as occupying a scientific universe, classic Doctor Who at least, a rational universe, even however much the science is invented. The TARDIS is obviously a fantastical invention, but we as viewers, as children, always understood it to be a device. It's not magic. It's not a magic wand that goes zap. It's a machine that's been developed by an extremely advanced alien technology. So the Doctor Who series always leans towards science fiction rather than fantasy. Science fiction with a gothic atmospheric. But I think that story does really pull off that, still within the Doctor Who context, still working as a Doctor Who story, pulls off that more sort of metaphysical, if that's the right word, I don't know. It's asking something different than just a straightforward science fiction story. And I remember thinking, it was a very interesting piece and sweet, and yes, quite sweet and quite touching. So, of course, on classic Doctor Who, one of the things about classic Doctor Who is that it's not really about the characters who are in the TARDIS. And again, I think the modern show is. I think that's the more modern... It's true, I don't follow Star Trek, but I'm under the impression it's true with Star Trek. It used to be a series where they beamed down and they discovered an adventure, whereas more and more it became about the crew. In fact, they had a whole one set on a space station, which was entirely about the people living on the space station, as I understand it. I'm not actually...
Deep Space Nine, yeah.
Yeah. And in Doctor Who, the modern Doctor Who is much more about Doctor Who and the girl, or Doctor Who and the companions. And the adventures sort of circle around them. Whereas on the old show, it's about leaving the TARDIS. And the subject of the story is what they discover. It's not... The subject of the story is not Adric or Nyssa or Tegan. And the subject of the story is not even the Doctor. The subject is what they discover. It's that Arthur Conan Doyle thing. You leave 221B Baker Street, go into a mystery, you solve the mystery. The story is the mystery. The story is what Sherlock Holmes and Watson investigate. And classic Doctor Who, which I've come to think of as Conan Doyle Doctor Who, that's my way of phrasing it now, is that's how classic Doctor Who worked. You leave the TARDIS, the subject of the story is what you walk into. The subject of the story is not the TARDIS crew, it's what they discover.
I mean, it's interesting mentioning Sherlock Holmes, because certainly the new series Sherlock the focus was on what was happening in Baker Street and those characters and their love lives, and Dr. Watson getting married and who she was, and so it's interesting that you say everything new tends to be a lot more. Yeah, I wonder why I said budget. I'd be curious to know why television's moved that way.
I think it's I think it comes from America. I think they realise that one of the things that a lot of people are looking for is they're looking for something that, I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but they're looking for something like soap opera. They're looking for ongoing imaginary relationships with fictional characters. So that Sherlock Holmes' stories are about Sherlock Holmes and about John Watson, as opposed to what they discover. Doctor Who being about the Doctor and about the companion. I think it becomes something closer to a soap opera because about their ongoing relationships, their ongoing crises, their ongoing, it does make it less science fictional, of course, in the case of Doctor Who, because once characters are having affairs, it doesn't matter whether the affair is in an apartment house in the East Village or on a spaceship. It's the same thing. Love affairs are the same thing. So it's less science fictional and closer to soap opera. And I suppose closer to the idea that audiences identify with characters. They imagine they are the characters. Whereas old Doctor Who is about the other. It's about somebody who you are not. You're not the Doctor. You are an observer of the Doctor, walk into adventures. I think more and more it's about a sort of identification. But I think it comes from American television. I think. But I'm guessing there. But I think basically. But it does seem to be the emphasis with all these things. It's about the sort of soap opera-y kind of elements with these characters. It's just a completely different approach.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been great talking to you. There's so much more we could talk about. And we will talk about when you're in Australia, so looking forward to that. So Matthew Waterhouse, thank you so much for your time.
Lovely, it's been great fun. Lovely. Cheers. Bye.
From Big Finish Productions,
Exterminate!
Doctor Who, the audio novels, Watchers.
This Dalek ship was smaller than most, some kind of experimental ship. Were these Daleks researchers like the Trollker? Probably. It was wise during dangerous early trials to put as few as possible into harm's way, even for the Daleks. The Daleks had long been obsessed with the conquest of time. They had tried often. Maybe there were other Daleks here in the hulk of lost ships, earlier or later failures. Tharves stood in silence, fuming, and yet feeling for these eerie, gliding killers a sort of admiration. They certainly knew something about discipline. The universe could use more of this kind of discipline, leaders strong and unforgiving, the led learning respect. Under other circumstances, he could imagine working with them. He looked at the space where his gun arm had once been. They were the enemy, and he would show them no quarter. And when he got the chance to destroy them, in their final moments they would bitterly admire him, as he bitterly admired them now. They went some way round the circular corridor into the main control room. It was ovular and dotted with machinery. The 6 white Daleks encircled the 3 prisoners. The gold Dalek spoke.
You are the one called the Doctor. Your faces are recorded in the memory of the Daleks. We do not forget. You have tried to interfere with our plans before. You have always failed.
Not always, said the Doctor with a toothy grin.
Our creator, Davros, knew of you. You tried to exterminate the Daleks. You failed. As always, you failed. We emerged stronger than ever. Now you will assist us.
Must I?
We will punish these creatures if you do not do as we instruct.
Why not let them go? Why destroy them?
Not destroy. Punish. They will suffer. You are sentimental. You will work with us to stop their suffering.
Will I?
Escort them to the time engine. We obey.
Two of the white Daleks pushed the Doctor and the Trolka back into the corridor, on the other side of which were several more doors. Behind them came the gold Dalek. The nearest door phosphoresced open, and they all went through, into a small room thick with technology. In the centre stood a structure of some glassy substance, completely surrounded by an ovular control panel. The design had an echo of a TARDIS. Had they at some time used one as a model? Had they pulled it apart to find its secrets? Had the Time Lords unwittingly showed the Daleks the way into the vortex?
We have entered the time stream successfully, but we have been unable to escape it. Our machinery is perfect. There is no error in the design. You must adjust the engine so that we can leave the vortex.
I'm not an expert on these things. Think of me as a taxi driver. I can make a car nip around corners, but don't ask me to build one.
You lie. You are a Time Lord of Gallifrey.
Not a very important one.
You lie. You know this technology. You understand it.
The gold Dalek swiveled.
Take these others to the holding cell. I obey.
All right, so it was fantastic to catch up with Matthew and Philip. I'm can't speak for you or for anyone else, but I'm really looking forward to seeing him in person in March.
Yeah, he's such a thoughtful man.
Yes.
And he's really able to explain things in a thoughtful way. And I'm really excited to talk more about his era of the show, the episodes, the writers, and just some of the dynamics that was happening at the time. Because it was a very hard time for Tom, who was leaving the show after 7 years and didn't want to go. And there was a hard time for Peter coming in, following in the footsteps of someone who was so big like Tom. And it was hard for Matthew being told you're leaving, even though he didn't want to go either. So it's a very complex time over that sort of 2 years he was in the show. I'm really looking forward to his analysis because, as we've just seen, Matthew really thinks deeply about issues and can express ideas in a really interesting way. It's going to be a fantastic time on stage with him.
Fantastic. All right, before we finish up the podcast today, we'll just come up with a recommendation or two. Now, what I'd like to recommend... I'd like to recommend something, but the list says, Philip, it's your turn to go first.
Okay. Well, listening to lots being finished, heaps at the moment. But I want to talk about one show I've watched recently called The Diplomat, which is an American second series that has come out. I'd heard lots of things about it. I watched it because Alison Janney is in the second season. For those who don't know, Alison Janney plays CJ Craig in The West Wing, which is a TV show that I think is absolutely brilliant. And I think, all the characters and all the actors in The West Wing. The first 4 seasons, Aaron Sorkin wrote astounding, and then it becomes a bit more soap opera, but I still enjoy the next 3 seasons. It's one of my favorite shows. And so The Diplomat is written by one of the main writers who went on. She was trained by Aaron Sorkin the first 4 years, and then she wrote some of the best episodes for the next 3 years of The West Wing. And she's the one who's written and produced and looked after, head show writer, The Diplomat. So it's about a woman who is supposed to be becoming the ambassador in the Middle East, but in the end, there's a plan that they're going to have to get rid of the vice president of America is a woman, but her husband's been doing some corrupt things, and so she has to go, and they want this new woman to take over, but she's not prominent enough, and so they decide we'll put her into the London office and make her the ambassador of London for a few months, and so we'll raise her profile and then bring her back as the vice president of America. So that's the plan, but in the process of which there's a huge explosion on board a British aircraft carrier, and there's intrigue and spies and travel, and it's very, very cleverly written, very interesting characters. And if you like a bit of a thriller, a bit of a whodunit, some clever politics and understanding how politics works cross-culturally with UK, America, it's a lot of fun. So if you like that sort of thing, The Diplomat, I strongly recommend it. What about you, Dwayne? What have you been either listening to or watching or
Well, I'm going to make a few recommendations on things that I haven't heard for a long time. I already mentioned The Lost Resort and Other Stories. If you want to get a really good Adric send-off story. Also, if I remember, I don't think I've heard it more than once, but I remember when Matthew came back for the first time, and he came out separate to the monthly range. It was a box set of that season 19 team, and there were 2 stories in the box set. The first one was called Psychodrome, but it was the second story, Iterations of I, that I can recall being absolutely blown away by. I think that was written from memory by John Dorney. So it was John Dorney's early days when all his ideas were completely, like we're used to John Dorney stories now coming out and blowing us away. But that in particular was still his early time of writing, and it was even more surprising to get that script. So plus the performance from Matthew, I think Psychodrome, I could sense him sort of finding his way for that story, but by Iterations of I, he'd slipped back into the Adric completely and totally, and it was wonderful. So I recommend that. I'd also recommend Watchers as well, which is an audio novel, the first audio novel that Matthew wrote, which I really enjoyed too. It may go in a little different direction to what you expect with a name called Watchers. So I'm not going to give you any more detail because it is so detail laden. I wouldn't remember half the story anyway. I just remember Matthew's reading was excellent. He's an awesome reader. And just on top of that too, if you go and search the short trips and look for Matthew's readings I think he's done 2 short trips. There's one short trip called The Ingenious Gentleman Adric of Alzarius, which is a bit of a quirky story. But the one that's exceptionally powerful, it's a 4th Doctor story called A Full Life. And it's got Adric just reflecting on his life, and it is amazing. If you don't listen to any other Big Finish featuring Matthew, I'd recommend get this one first. It is unmissable. I can highly, highly recommend A Full Life. So, I've given a few different recommendations there, but there are those. All right. That'll do us today, Philip. It's been wonderful, as always. And 2025 is going to be looking as busy as ever for us all, especially you.
That'll be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Until next time, we'll catch you all later.
Bye, everyone.
This has been the Sirens of Audio, the boy who saved the world, with our guest Matthew Waterhouse and your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Theme music by Joe Kramer. Catch up with all the latest info, including news and our live events, at sirensofaudio.com. Got some feedback? Send your emails to sirensofaudio@gmail.com, or you can find us on all our social media at Audio Sirens. Thanks for listening, Audiophiles. We'll hear you next time.